is that Howie Roseman and Nick Sirianni, and it's not too often in a given year, Howie meets with the media and talks, but he did recently to the writers. So did Nick Sirianni with the writers, and we have one of those writers that was there covering that, ready to tell us all sorts of stuff about what Howie and Nick said. And that, of course, is our guy, Mr. Eliot Shorr-Parks. Eliot, good morning, pal.
What up? How you guys doing this morning?
Doing well, Eliot. Let's get to it. Combine starts today. Howie and Nick will speak again later today, but you and a few writers, select writers, had a unique opportunity to get him on the record, but with no audio. So what we have is the transcript of the quotes. What stood out to you the most of what Howie or Nick said? What was the number one takeaway you have?
Man, there's so much to get to with what they said. They spoke for over an hour, and I really think the purpose of it was to set the tone for the offseason of what to expect. So I guess I would say my biggest takeaway would be Howie explaining their thought process on what they're going to try to do this offseason. They have, if you look at it, 10 guys on the defense that are either up for a contract this year or will be up for a contract next year. And it's guys like Jalen Carter, Jordan Davis, Quinion, Cooper, Jalen Phillips, Reed, Nakobe. And his message to the fans via us was they want to re-sign their own guys. They want to, give the money they have to the guys that are in the building that they know can play well. But they're going to have to be selective. They're not going to re-sign all these players. And I think guys that he did not say this, but my read on it is guys like Nakobe, guys like Reed Blankenship, they're probably not the guys that are going to prioritize getting the money. We'll see what the market ends up being for them, but I think the message was clear. Of the money they have, it's going to go to their own guys, and they'll maybe dip into free agency, but I wouldn't expect a lot of moves in free agency.
Well, very interesting, Eliot, that you say that, because that was my number one takeaway as well, based on the quotes that you sent us, transcribing what they said. My number two takeaway was what Nick Sirianni said about A.J. Brown. So let's get to this one. Nick is asked about A.J. Brown, and the question is, and this was one of a few questions asked, but one of the questions was, will A.J. be here next season? And while he gave a long filibustering type answer, I thought the beginning of it was the heart of it. His answer to will A.J. be here next season began with this. He said, quote, I think that we're still in a spot like I can't guarantee how anything's going to play out into the next season. That tells me, Eliot, and I've known this before or thought it before, AJ's probably gone, right?
Yeah, so I think Nick is bad sometimes at hiding what he really thinks. And I think what I saw with Nick and what you're reading there with Nick is he does not know, right? They do not know if AJ is going to be back next year. And I'll combine some of what Howie said with what Nick said, because Nick said he wants AJ back. He said AJ wants to be back. He said AJ's a good teammate, a good player. And Howie reiterated some of those things. But what Howie said, and I think this is what it comes down to, is his job is to listen to offers. When someone calls about a player, he will listen to anything, right? Because you never know what that offer is going to be. So my read on the AJ situation after spending, over an hour with Howie and Nick is they're going to listen to offers. And let's just use the Patriots, right? If the Patriots call and offer a really good value trade for AJ, I think they'll take it. But I also don't think they're going into this offseason saying we have to trade AJ. And I don't think AJ's going into this offseason saying I do not want to be back in Philadelphia. I think both sides will ultimately find a situation that leads to him being traded. But I don't think it's an untenable situation if they don't get a good offer.
Jeez. So you said you were there for about an hour with Howie and Nick. Walking away, what was your impression of our tight end plan? What are we going to do? Because it feels like our top two guys right now are likely not back.
Yeah, so Howie actually took some responsibility for the tight end position. I know it's something we talked a lot about throughout the season. The Calcaterra struggling as a blocker, them not having really any great blocking options. Goddard probably not blocking as well as he normally does. And Howie said,
so much worse, yeah, Eliot.
Yeah, and Howie's saying, I probably prioritize too much of one skill set with that position. So with Sean Mannion and the offense they want to run, and they certainly talked a lot about that, which we can get into. But the tight end position is going to be important. They're going to run 2 tight end sets. Blocking is going to be crucial.
Hold on. They talked a lot about valuing the wrong skill set for the entire tight end position.
Oh, I thought it was a shot at Goddard to an extent, Elliot.
I did not take it as a shot at Goddard. I think what he was basically saying was that he did a poor job giving the coaches a diverse kind of set of skill sets at the position. But I don't think he needed to say that.
Elliot, let me clarify when I say a shot at Goddard. Here's what I mean. I agree with you. What he's saying in part is, if Goddard's breaking down physically and can't block as well, Calcaterra's not a good backup, third-string guy's not a good backup, someone's got to be able to block. But my point is, and this is where I go to in the offseason, I don't mean shot like it's out of line, what he said, but to me what he was saying in code was Goddard's not the player he used to be. He can't block the way he used to be.
So I took it more about the backups. That's just my read on it, right? Like, I took it more about the players he gave the coaches he feels were not good enough, especially with the backups. Now, will Goddard be back? I think that's going to be dictated by the market. You saw Kyle Pitts got the franchise tag put on him yesterday. There's a few other interesting options out there, but Goddard is one of the top options. So we'll see what he ends up making. But again, to go back to how he set the tone, I think a lot of the money they're going to spend is going to go to the defensive side of the ball.
Eliot Shorr-Parks with us here, brought to us by Colonial Hyundai, the fast, easier, better way to buy a Hyundai. Eliot, this was the first time Nick and Howie were on the record since Stoutland was out. What did you make of how they both handled Stoutland questions?
Yeah, so, I thought one of the best quotes of the offseason was what Jason Kelsey said on your show when he talked about how since he's been there, they've always kind of had everything very segmented, like this person does that, this person does that, and it's not streamlined. Nick kind of reiterated that, I would say, when talking about Stoutland. He said he didn't want to get into the speculation and the reporting about how maybe things were ugly at the end with Stoutland, but he did say he didn't feel there were major changes made. They just wanted to streamline things a little bit more. So, Nick kind of, downplayed the idea that it was an ugly breakup, but it was a breakup. Not many breakups aren't ugly. And then Howie kind of talked about how he's been with Stoutland a long time, and Howie's focus on it was more draft related, because we know from covering the team, watching the team, talking about the team, Stoutland is really big when it comes to developing these players. And Howie said that, yeah, of course, that's going to be, Stoutland's amazing at that. But him and Stoutland saw things the same way, and he doesn't think things will change too much in terms of who they draft. So they didn't focus too much on the breakup part, needless to say. But, Howie did talk about moving forward. It's obviously a challenge without Stoutland.
Eliot, in the interview with Nick, did you believe him when he kept really sort of overdoing I think I interviewed 17 guys at the end of the day and then had double interviews with like 7 of them, and, the third interview of the day, I just had an epiphany as Sean Mannion walked in the door. It just it felt a little heavy-handed, like, hey, just make sure. It felt like they had the pep talk meeting beforehand, like, just make sure you remind everyone that you're the one who did the interviews, Nick. Did you get that sort of stilted feel when you were there, or is that me reading into these words on the page unfairly?
So he definitely talked a lot about collaboration. Now, he was asked a lot about it, right? And I think that Nick is never going to say anything that'll convince anybody that he's the one making the decisions, right? Like, none of us truly know. Nick does say it's a collaborative approach. I believe Nick when he says he hires the staff. You guys might not, other people might not. But there's nothing Nick will say that'll ever truly convince people that think he's like a puppet to Sirianni, to Howie and Jeffrey Lurie. But Nick did talk a lot about how, and going into this hiring process, they kind of knew the offense they wanted to run. And as they met with more people, it became more obvious about the offense they wanted to run. And Mannion seems like a guy they think can help them install some of that offense. But he was also clear in saying, like, they're going to mesh things together, that they're not just going to abandon everything they did last year. So my read on the situation after talking to Nick about the offense, is they're definitely going to try to install some of like the Kyle Shanahan, Sean McVay, Mike McDaniel type of concepts. And you'll see Jalen under center more. I think they're going to do a lot more play action on first and second down from under center. But I also think they know that, this is why they kept Parks Frazier. They have to keep some of the stuff from last year because you can't switch everything over. So I think it'll be a mesh, but they're definitely going into this with Nick running it, like trying to install a new type of offense.
Speaking of Nick, Eliot, I thought Howie's answer about why he went out of his way at the season-ending press conference to pump up Nick was fascinating. So I want everyone to know, Howie was asked, why did you think it was important to make that clear? That being that Howie's a big believer in Nick. And the beginning of his answer, Howie Roseman's answer, was this: because I'm kept abreast of what goes on. Bob, that means Bob Lang, Eagles Media Relations Director. Bob keeps me posted of what's going on, and I don't think it's fair. And then he continued on talking about how Nick's won a lot. I think to be a head coach in the National Football League for 5 years, to make the playoffs 5 years, and to be in 2 Super Bowls is hard. Eliot, 2 things I'm struck by. 1, he's really going to bat for Nick. 2, I don't see that same level of going to bat for Jalen. Your thoughts?
Well, so I had 2 thoughts. 1, I do agree it's noteworthy how much he's going to bat for Nick. I think that one of the reasons they're so successful as a team, obviously not last year, but over the past few years, is because Nick and Howie really get along. And you've seen other head coaches not have that relationship with Howie. So I do think it's authentic the way they get along. I also think you can read in there a little bit of Howie seeing himself in Nick, where Howie's always been viewed as like, he's a cap guy. He's not a football guy, right? Like, he doesn't actually know football. He's just someone that's good with the numbers. And I think he sees some of that with Nick, where people kind of point to Nick and go, well, he's not an offensive guy. He wins all the time, but he doesn't really know football. So I think they kind of relate in that way. And it's something I never really thought about until Howie talked about it that way. But in terms of Jalen, I didn't read that into it. He wasn't really asked much about Jalen. One question he was asked, he did say he thought Jalen could do, whatever the offense asks of him. So I didn't have that takeaway, but it is an interesting one.
Here's my point, though, Eliot. If he wanted to go out of his way to make the point, he could, and he hasn't twice.
Well, it could also be because he might be in a contract negotiation with Jalen.
He doesn't want to praise him too much.
Let me tell you something, big guy. He ain't in a contract negotiation with Jalen Hurts this offseason.
Yeah, you don't think so?
No.
All right.
We talking about a pay cut or a pay raise?
Oh, geez. Here we go.
All right, Eliot. Eliot, nice work, my man.